10 years ago, I rescued a boy from drowning to death. After undergoing resuscitation, woke up and exclaimed,
I will marry you when I grow up.
I laughed, thinking it was the promise of a small. A decade later, that child had been transformed into a young man
and
at the dinner of my wedding with my boyfriend, and broke up accompanied by several men, intimidated my partner, and took me out by force. I promised I would marry you. You can only belong to me. Threatened my relatives and forced me to join him in marriage. I found myself confined to her huge residence, prohibiting me from any relationship with other males. Tried everything to win my affection, but I remained indifferent. Desperately located and impersonated a girl who looked almost identically like me. This girl, driven by his curiosity, got out of control and broke up in my residence with his equipment. Who is this imposter who intends to snatch my man using from me? I'm going to destroy it. They harassed me to exhaustion. He arrived too late. The impersonator me towards him, bragging. This fake was trying to conquer you here. I took care of her. Ethan was madly in love with me obsessively. I claimed that from the moment I saved him, understood that he must possess me. To conquer myself, I remained isolated for 3 years. I need everything to make me happy. But I didn't want it. I could never want it recently, though. Found a young woman who looked exactly like me, had been inseparable for months. To provoke me, he would send me recordings of them together. I was sitting in the garden, watching one of those recordings when I heard a disturbance outside. Ethan always comes here on the sly. I'm going to see what he's hiding, but Mr. said that this residence is prohibited. No one is allowed to enter, yes. I heard that it made an individual severely sanctioned and expelled him in the worst way possible. Just for spying. We are sure of this. Relax, Ethan is with me. I wouldn't hurt a princess I care about. When I heard the noise outside, I frowned, frowning with a bad feeling. Leaning on my chest, knew how controlling he could be. Was possessive. Treated me like a trophy, keeping me confined. Someone once snuck in through just to take a look. Ethan had him punished harshly and kicked him out. The guy disappeared the next day. At first I was only jealous of men, then realized that I was nicer to the housekeepers than with him, and fired them all in a fit of rage. He preferred to bring me the meals himself 3 times before I let someone else look at me. If such people were to enter, they would be in serious trouble. I got up to warn them to leave. But when you opened the door, a face almost identical to mine brought back my eyes. Before I could speak, pushed me hard. Who the hell are you? You have a lot of nerve. Loitering around Ethan's place with my face on it. I need to steal my man right. The push hurt, leaving my cheek red. You cheap counterfeit! You know where you are. How dare you enter without permission? And you have the nerve to fix your face too. Look like and try to seduce the gentleman. Gauthern, you are desperate. I finally understood. This girl who had just burst in and attacked me was, I need Ethan's double. Due to Ethan's controlling nature, I had always been cold and distant even. After forced to marry him, I kept on the sidelines without letting it get close, perhaps out of spite or perhaps to fill a void. Looked for someone who looked like me and was the closest thing he could find. Was furious. His eyes practically spat on fire. Hey, you know Ethan is crazy about me. You think you can be me? You think you can replace me? Was aggressive and unpleasant. But since I did not know the truth, I decided not to give too much importance to the attack. Instead, I tried to warn him, this is not a place leave now before it arrives. Ethan, you will regret it if you don't. But I was literally not listening. Held me furiously. Ethan is my man. I can go wherever I want. Or just get rid of me so I don't expose your little plan. Truth. So that you can continue playing the other woman. Well, I'm going to teach you a lesson for messing with me. Made me stumble, making me fall flat on my face. I hit the ground and got hurt. I touched the mark, looking at the furious teacher. You're not afraid of what Ethan will do when he finds out. Made fun of Ethan. Is madly in love with me, would become crazy if only I made a paper cut. What will it do to punish me for you? You are nothing. Her intervened with voices brimming with, yes? Everyone knows. How much, mister? You are just a copycat, an aspirant. Mr. Howarth is rich and powerful. Probably has tons of gold digger how he is trying to catch it. Let's make an example with it. Let's show them exactly what happens. Let them know who is the true wife of the Lord. Howarth looked at me fiercely. His words were sharp and affectionate, as if they wanted to destroy me emotionally. My expression, you'd better ask Ethan who I am, raised his chin with eyes full of disdain. You, a random girl loitering around her residence.
You think you are important enough
to ask about you. I am Ethan's soulmate. My family is its largest business partner. Who you are? You think you can compare yourself to me? His eyes squinted. Take away those accessories and ruin his attire. Let's see if she has managed to copy everything from me. They jumped on my clothes with their hands,
stopped when they heard my words,
looked at me with squinted eyes. What? You are saying that you are Ethan's wife? I firmly stated. Yes, you are just a double, he found. If I knew you were treating me like this,
I would never forgive you.
I thought the truth would stop them instead. Burst laughing. This girl of liar is using his fake face to try to socially ascend, saying that is the imposter. Everyone knows that Howarth takes everywhere. This girl snuck in here and now claims to be his wife. Smiled smugly, cruel with a gleam. I thought that you would be smart in trying to seduce with my face, but you are stupid. Has been Ethan and I've never heard of a wife. How many lives you have? This lie if you were crazy, Mrs. How you would not be hidden in this residence. Deserts, completely alone. Mocked by turning to her friends. Undo your entire arrangement. To the last resume detail. Their assault, ruining my appearance with renewed vigor. Clearly did not realize it. The reason why the area was deserted was Ethan because had purchased all the lands 4 miles around. No one was allowed to enter without their permission. There used to be guards and staff, but Ethan's unhealthy jealousy had driven them all away. Had not announced my status because I couldn't stand the idea that someone else, look at me, even talking about me was in his mind a betrayal. And now were the reasons why they didn't believe me, while my appearance was undone. Panic took hold of me. I screamed, I am Ethan's wife. Call him if you don't believe me. I was ignored and their attack intensified. You're still lying. We'll get the truth out of you. Force. My face was red from the effort and anger. My hair was a mess, entangled, and I felt totally humiliated. As I shown her, hair is... Get it out of the way. Took out some scissors that he found and cut my hair mercilessly. The process was fast, ruining my hair. The emotional pain was unbearable. I tried to stop it with my hands, but they had them immobilized. In a matter of moments, my beautiful hair disappeared. Laughed, satisfied. Let's see if you try to seduce someone by seeing you like this. Her friends joined in, clapping and cheering. I glared at them with my eyes. With the body. Will regret this. Imprisoned by Ethan for years. Threatened to the safety of my family. I had lost my freedom I passed. My days looking at the walls of the empty residence. With resentment boiling inside me. And now I had to endure humiliation at the hands of his double. My resentment turned to burning hatred. Pushed me again. You still feel like fighting. Since your mouth doesn't say anything I like, how about making sure he never speaks again? Never. Silence it. A bodyguard stepped forward with a rope. One of the friends, a little less bold than the others. Too hesitant. This is Mr. Howard's place. We shouldn't. You already know how to tone it down a bit. Sanchez waved his hand with disdain. That Ethan is my man. No, your home is my home. I can discipline a small intruder in my own house. No more. Ethan loves me. I would flinch if I made her disappear from her sight. The others agreed. Yes, it is also practically Mrs. You can do whatever Mr. Howard you want. Probably just feels sorry for himself. For her, for having to deal with this princess, the hesitant friend kept quiet. I was on the ground watching them come to tie me down. Terror took hold of me. I screamed, I am Ethan's wife. He will be very angry about this. My words had no effect. The expressionless bodyguard caught up with me. I tried to escape. Me. The impotence was unbearable. Was already in a state of extreme weakness. Barely aware of the fatigue. Looked at me from above with his voice distilling. Do you think Ethan would even give you a look? He loves me, the person you understand. Not every street woman can have a life like mine. Not everyone can capture Ethan's heart. Since you are so desperate for a man, I will give you a few. Turn to the bodyguards. Take her away and lock her up. Whoever does the best making job, sure he does not return, receives a bonus of $200,000. The eyes of the bodyguards lit up. Their faces turned somber. I got caught. I stood there, helpless. I just defended myself. Ethan, despite his twisted possessiveness, I have never been treated so badly. I had never been disrespected, even when he rejected it. Never forced himself upon me. Said he would wait until I gave myself up voluntarily to him. Said that I was destined to be his. And now she was being humiliated by these men. Lost in a sea of despair. I couldn't scream, just cry. Ethan, this is what you wanted? S friends watched in praise of her. You have a natural talent. For all this, being Mrs. Howard. You really know how to handle these situations, yes? Look at her! Will never again attempt to steal the man from anyone. Congratulations. There's one less gold digger to worry about. Smiled from ear to rejoicing in her praise as a general. Victorious, then. Bodyguard reactions have changed. One of them stood up and pointed at me. Miss has vanished. She does not react. Frowned in disgust. How sick. Just get it out of here and hide it somewhere. I don't want it to ruin the view of the place when I arrive. Ethan, at that very moment, Ethan entered the garden was not the Ethan I knew. The Ethan I knew was controlled, calculated, cold, with near surgical precision. The man who crossed the garden door at that moment, it was something different. His eyes scrolled through the scene in a second, and something on his face broke in a way that from the pool of blood where he lay, I saw with a strange and distant clarity, turned his shoulder, took a second to fall. Ethan, love me. The sound Ethan made was not a scream, was something that predates the language, something that came out of a place where words do not yet exist. Threw towards me, the bodyguards scattered like leaves in the wind. The friends' barriers receded, colliding with each other. No one in that garden has ever seen Ethan before lose control, and most of them in the space of 3 seconds who had made the most serious mistake of their lives. Ethan fell to his knees beside me. His hands that I had seen billionaires with absolute coldness were trembling. ABS. My name sounded like something that was collapsing. ABS. Look at me, I tried. The world had already turned to a strange color. As wet paper, I could hear it. But I felt nothing clearly, which at that point was almost a relief. Ethan. I murmured, I don't know why I called it. Maybe because it was the only name available. Came out of him with the softest voice from I had ever heard him. Use. Love this girl snuck in here, she said. She was your wife. The boys. Ethan stood up. I didn't exactly see him move. I only saw that he was on his knees beside me. And then he was standing in front of, and the space between those two moments had disappeared. Speaks again. Said in a voice that he had no volume, but it filled the whole garden. I beg you. Speaks again. Literally opened her mouth. She closed it. She said, Ethan with a precision that sounded like cutting glass. My wife is the only person on this planet by which I would have destroyed everything I have. A pause, and you did not say the phrase, did not need to finish it. Bodyguards tried to move towards the exit. Two of Ethan's men had arrived without my noticing them. Finally fell of the sadness of what he had done, I did not know. No one told me you had a wife. I thought it was a fortune's house. I was just outside, said Ethan. Love, please. Let me explain. Out of my sight. Repeated with the same still and total voice. If I see you in the next 10 seconds, I don't answer for what happens. I understand running away. Her friends followed her by the bodyguard, were detained by Ethan's men. Ethan knelt beside me again, lifted my head. With a delicacy that I had not known him before. In 3 years of forced marriage, his eyes were doing something that I had not seen before. I will never look for help, he said. Listen to me, I'm going to, it's late, I said. The words came out by themselves, not as an accusation. As information. Ethan clenched his jaw. Don't say that it's true. I said, and it was true. I could feel it. With such strange clarity that they have the truths that come too late. The last thing the expression on Ethan Hawthorne's face. The man who had taken 3 years from me that had locked
and controlled
me up and treated as a trophy. That expression that had no name that I knew, and then it was all gone. I woke up, not gradually, all at once, with clarity, from someone who has been back to existence without being asked your opinion on the matter. It took me several seconds to process where I was. It was a white hospital room with sound equipment. My left hand had in line. My ribs protested when I tried to breathe deep into my head. Weighed in a way that reminded me of vaguely then something had happened to her. I was alive. This information took a moment to land. Was alive, which meant that Ethan had arrived in time for the doctors to something, which meant that I had not died, which meant that I now had to decide what to do with that fact. I stared at the ceiling. The door to the room opened. It wasn't Ethan. Was a woman in her 50s, looking like someone who has spent decades being the most competent person in any room. Which it was introduced as Dr. Chun, explained to me efficiently and without smoothing the details, the extent of my injuries and what I had required. Stabilize them. When he asked me if I understood everything I had said, I told him that there is something I need. Information, I said. Where's Ethan Howarth? Dr. Chun took a note, has been in the hallway for 16 hours. Said he has not eaten anything that I know of. We have asked him to wait somewhere more comfortable, but left the sentence on with someone's expression who has tried to persuade Ethan Hawthorne to do and something. Has the futility of this exercise quickly. Wants me to pass it on. I thought of the expression I had seen on his face. In the garden, not yet. I said. Dr. Chun nodded without judgment and asked, with the sound of the equipment and the cold light and weight of everything that had happened in the last few hours, days, I wasn't sure how much time had passed. 3 years she had spent, 3 years in that residence alone, with resentment as the only company telling the ways in which my life had been taken without my consent, and was now in a living hospital bed for reasons all to do with a man who had hurt me in ways that were not easily resolved. I closed my eyes when I opened them again. Had made a decision not about Ethan, not yet about me, had survived. That was the basic fact from which everything else started. And the person who had survived was not being the same one who sat in the garden, looking at walls, while resentment boiled in silence. That person had been enclosed not only by the walls of the residence, but by its own paralysis. The version that had survived needed to be different. I started with the smallest. I called the teacher and asked for water and paper. When they were brought to me, I wrote 3 things. First, what I knew about not what he had done. That it was already a matter of, and probably from justice, but what I knew about how he had arrived at the residence, who had taken her, who knew that the area was supposedly prohibited, and had worn it anyway. The person who had told him Ethan that was secretly going to that residence. There was someone inside Ethan's circle who had informed her. Second, what I knew about family business. In 3 years of confinement, I had had time to learn many things about Ethan's world. Not because he told me, but because is listening a developing skill when you have nothing else to do, and had enough to know that the association between Southern Anne's family had. I thought they would not invent adequate third-party scrutiny. The names of the 3 persons in Ethan's team that I genuinely loyal to him and not to his money. I folded the paper and put it under the pillow. Outside, in the hallway, Ethan Hawthorne had been waiting for 16 hours. I would make him wait a little longer. Ethan entered on the 3rd day. Not because I would have asked for it, but because on the 3rd day, I had been moved to a private suite in the wing, and the door had a handle that he had clearly decided that it was enough time. Respecting found me sitting on the bed with the paper folded over the table and a book that the teacher had given me, of which I had read exactly 4 pages because my mind not stand Ethan stopped still. Right inside the door. 16 hours in the hallway plus 2 days. Additional information somewhere in the hospital. They had done what they do to anyone. Looked exhausted in the way it had nothing to do with not but sleeping. By carrying something too heavy. For too long. The shirt wrinkled the eyes that had not rested. I said nothing. I let him stand at the door. As long as you need ABA. Finally, entered, sat in the chair next to the bed. Not on the edge, but entirely like someone else who has stopped pretending that his visit is brief. looked at me for a moment. How much damage I did to you? Still not the question I expected. Was too direct to be Ethan, which generally involved everything in control and strategy. Do you want the medical list or the other one? I said. Something on his face tightened the two. I gave them to her with the efficiency with which had given them to me. Physical first, then the rest. I did not exaggerate, I did not soften. In the residence, the progressive isolation, the form in which every time I tried to establish a bond with someone, he eliminated the erosion of having a single point of contact with the world that was him. And that was simultaneously the source of the problem. Ethan listened without interrupting. When I finished, the silence lasted long enough to be
I know
reason
you
to
don't
trust anything I say.
Now, finally
And I'm not
said,
going to ask you to pause it, but I need you to know that all those who were with her, they are going to answer for what they did to you. I know I said so. That's not what worries me. He looked at me. What worries you? I took the paper out from under the pillow and spread it on it. Ethan read the paper twice. The first time, quickly, as someone verifying that he had understood correctly. The second, with that concentration that I had seen in him, used when reviewing contracts. When he looked up, there was something different about them. How do you know this about family? 3 years of listening. I shrugged my shoulders carefully because shrugging on your shoulders still hurt. I had a lot of free time. The name at the end indicated the third section of the paper. The 3 names. How did you come to them? Observation. The personnel it maintained, close in the moments when I did not need impressing, knowing people. To which he delegated things when I was tired of keeping the needle. I took a break. People who looked at him as a person and not as a source of resources. Ethan dubbed the role carefully. The name in the second section said the person who told that the residence existed and that I went there. One of these 3 names in common with someone who frequented. I do not know if it was direct or indirect. But the cross-stitch exists. Ethan
nodded slowly, not exactly.
With the recognition specific to someone who has just received valuable information from a source I did not expect. Why are you giving me this? Was the right question. Because the person who leaked the information is a threat to you, I said, and because I lived for 3 years in that residence. If she falls because someone compromised her, I was also playing that is car interest. Partly, I did not deny it, and partly because I have not yet what I want to happen after all this, and I is not contaminated by unresolved filtration. Ethan looked at me for a long moment. What do you want to happen next? I still don't know, I said. But I am going to decide without anyone telling me what to want. Something in his expression changed, not dramatically. Only a small adjustment. As when an image that you were.
Close-up finally focuses.
Agreed, he said.
Marcus Chun was one of the 3 names on my list. Had met him briefly in the second year of when Ethan brought him in to check some documents and forgot for a moment his usual rule of staying completely isolated. Marcus was a lawyer.
40-something
looking like someone who has
years.
seen enough of the world not to be easily impressed by anything, had looked at me at that moment, short, with the expression of someone who is recording without judging it. 2 days after my conversation with Ethan, Marcus showed up in the hospital suite. Not sent by Ethan, he clarified it before he sat down. I came on my own, said I knew. What happened? And I needed to verify that you were okay. Why the question stopped him for a second. Because what Ethan did to you was wrong. And what you did made me add. And what you did corrected you without resistance. No part of it is right. And there are people in Ethan's circle who knew it. And I don't understand enough to change it. What they could have done, tell you directly, a pause. Some of us tried, not in the right way or with enough insistence. I observed it for a moment. Why? You tell me.
Why? Marcus said carefully.
I think,
whatever
from here,
happens,
you should include your perspective. Not only, I took the paper off the table and spread it out. He took it with the same attention as Ethan. Although, in less time, the name of the leak. You recognize? Marcus looked up. You can document it with a pause. Probably looked at me what you're planning. I am still building the plan, I said honestly, but I know I need 2 things. The first is the leak solved with documentation. Enough to make the second. Is information on in the family business. presented in a manner that cannot be dismissed as personal revenge. Marcus was silent for a moment. Reactions are real, he finally said. In the margins of some joint contracts with the Howarth, I never formally pointed them out. Because it was not my position to do it without instructions. Now you have instructions from you, that's a problem. Marcus considered this. He did not say it is not that night alone. At Sweet, I thought about the first time I saw Ethan Hawthorne, not the executive. The boy was 21 years old. He was 11 years old. Was on the shore of a lake in the park with a textbook about the knees when I heard the sound. Without thinking, I went into the water. Without thinking, I threw it to the shore. Without thinking it, I gave him resuscitation until he coughed up water and breathed. And then he opened his eyes and said with his voice, snoring from someone who has just come back, I'm going to marry you when I grow up. I laughed. I thought it was the governor of a frightened child who had just lived. Something scary, and I was clinging to the first face. Kindly available. It wasn't that it was exactly what he said, and now, 10 years later, I was in a bed with broken ribs and cut hair, with a paper folded under the pillow, and a lawyer who was going to build a case with me, and a husband who lived days without sleep in the corridors, and a version of that had taken 3 years to appear, but that now that I was here, had no intention of disappearing again. The girl who went into the lake without thinking about it, the time had come to think. Marcus, fast. 2 weeks after I left the hospital, he sent me a digital archive with 200 pages of documentation, contracts, transfer records, internal correspondence, innovations in the family business. Mistakes were not small accounting errors, were systematic, sustained over the years and buried in sufficient layers of corporate structure to someone without specific training. You will never find them. Marcus had found them because he knew where to look. And because he had had 3 weeks of motivation, this is enough. He told me when we met in a neutral, without Ethan's knowledge. Correctly presented. This destroys the family's reputation. In the sector. And creates to recover the assets of the joint contracts. Who have pets? How much is that worth? Marcus quoted a figure. I did not react externally. Internally, I processed that it was a considerable amount by Ethan's standards. Hawthorne and the leak. I asked. Marcus opened a second folder. The person who had informed Sanchez about the residence was Ethan's executive assistant. No, el actual, which had been replaced 6 months ago, and that, according to Marcus, had come out with a reference. And no type of exit investigation will allow it to be, which meant that leak had occurred before Ethan to fire possibly in retaliation for something. And that no one had made the connection. Because no one had looked for a connection. No one but me. From a hospital bed, with a pen and paper. Is documented, I asked. Communications deleted but recovered, said Marcus. Financial transfers to an account associated with infections. Dating from 8 months ago, a break. Enough to legally present Ethan or directly to the legal area. Marcus looked at me with someone's expression. Reconsidering the person in front of you. Which do you prefer? Directly to the legal area, I said with a copy to Ethan simultaneously without intermediaries who soften the content before it arrives. Marcus nodded. We send it tomorrow. Ethan called me for hours after receiving the copy, not in anger. With the stillness that I had learned to read correctly in 3 years. The stillness he had. When something had hit him enough, and so that its usual control mechanism could not be processed yet. The assistant said, yes, how long have you been knowing? I identified him at the hospital. Marcus verified and documented. A silence. I found it needed to be documented. Before I tell you. If I told you without documentation, you could have reacted before there was evidence, and he could have destroyed the trail. Another longer silence, Ethan said. Documentation on's family is also complete. Is in the same. I send whatever they do with it is up to the legal area. ABA, why did you do it? It was the second time I had asked this question. This time, I answered it differently. Because I deserve that the people who hurt me answer for it, I said, and why do it? Correctly, with documentation and legal process. Is the only way the result lasts. Silence agreed, he said. Just like the previous time in the hospital, I hung up, was processed 3 weeks later. Not because of what he had done directly to me, although these charges also existed, but because when the legal area of house presented the documentation
Marcus
of
too.
the corresponding authorities, triggered a review of the joint contracts, which
Unearthed
in tax
turn.
records that the family Hof had been burying for years. Research absorbed the entire family. The father, the brothers, the partners faced charges. Additional information for what happened at the residence that Marcus had documented with the same nest and everything else, using the hospital's medical records. The testimony of the friendship that attended the first night and the statement of's only friend that at the prospect of own positions decided that loyalty had a reasonable limit. I did not attend any of the preliminary hearings. Not because I couldn't, because was not necessary for the process to work. And the process, when there were no additional emotional components, complicating the mechanics. What I did do was sign each document
Marcus
that
introduced
at the right
me
time with the corresponding signature. On the day the investigation was made public, Ethan showed up in the apartment where I had settled. Not in the residence. Had never returned to the residence. Ethan knew it and had not mentioned it. I rang the doorbell from the intercom. "What you need to talk about," said. On what a short pause from the intercom. "About what follows," he said. I let it go up, sat on the couch by the window, which was the only place sitting in the apartment that it was not occupied by books or the materials that Marcus and I had been working for weeks. He looked at the apartment with the way he looked at it. When I was processing something, "You have been," said no, as a question, as a verification. "Better than 3 years," I responded. I said it with no intention of hurting. It was simply true, and we both knew it. And Tana felt used with the same weight as the first time in the hospital. "What I did to you for 3 years, I have no way of..." I have not interrupted it calmly yet. "That's a conversation we're going to have, but not before I'm ready to have it." And I still am not. Shut his mouth. "What I can tell you now," I continued, "is what I want to happen from here and what I don't hear you." Had been building that list from the hospital. I took it out. Was a leaf. Not Marcus, 200 pages of documentation, not folded hospital paper. A single handwritten with the handwriting sheet. I have when I write without and no audience. Ethan read it without interrupting. Took longer than with previous documents, which made sense because the documents were about other people. And this was about us. When left it on his knee.
Freedom of movement, said.
No geographic restrictions, no approval required. Yes. Independent legal representation at my cost. Yes. Unsupervised contact with my family. And the people I choose an account in my name. Separate, with resources. Enough to be independent if I decide to. And the right to terminate this marriage at any time without consequences for me or for people. Ethan lifted his eyes from the leaf. Yes, I said before he spoke. That also a long silence. If I accept all this, he finally said, what I get was the most honest question Ethan had made me in 3 years. I possibility said to stay because I choose to stay, not because I have no other choice. The silence that followed was different from before. More still, with more weight, in a good way, according to said for the 3rd time, the same as the previous ones. This time, it was different because what I was accepting was different. Marcus drafted the documents that week. We both signed them with witnesses. No barriers or small buried clauses. Ethan did not negotiate any points.
Which he told
something
me
that 3 years of I had not been able to be told was sentenced 2 months later. I will not repeat the charges or the penalty. Not because they are not relevant, but because my history does not end up in court. Ends with what happened next. What happened next was this I called my family. Not through intermediaries. Not with the discomfort of the caller after years of forced silence and has to explain things that are difficult to explain. I just called, and when my mother answered and heard my voice, the sound on the other side of the line was enough to leave me speechless. For a moment, ABA said hello. I said, we talked for 2 hours, then talked another day. Then we started regularly talking with the naturalness they have. Conversations when people who have them know each other and they only needed the space to meet again. ISA never interfered once. The process of deciding whether to stay or leave took time. I will not compress it into a paragraph. With a neat resolution, because it was a series of days. Some better than others, in which I had, for the first time in the possibility of making small decisions, without anyone monitoring them what to eat, where to go, to talk to, what time to get up. Decisions. Small are those that build a person. I understood it in those weeks of regained freedom. Not the big decisions, but the accumulation of the little ones that remind you of that you're someone with preferences of your own and not an object in another person's inventory. Ethan was different during that not perfect period. Perfect was not a marvel. Reasonable for a man who had spent years
Being the definition of the problem.
but different. Yes, less controller in small gestures, present in a way that did not demand a response. One afternoon, I found it in the library of the new house that we had chosen together, replacing the residence, reading with the same gesture. Distracted with the one I had seen him read and archive photos from when I was 11 years old. Before I knew him, before everything else, I sat on the couch in front of him, saying nothing. He raised his eyes. "Hello," he said. "Hello," I
continue
replied.
reading
His book
for an hour
without
conversation.
with nothing to solve. Only two
Sharing
people,
a space
without either of them owed it to the other. Was the first time that something similar
Genuine
felt possible. There is something I did not understand of resentment and walls and accumulated silence. I understood it later. The person who enters without thinking to save a stranger. Courage is not brave. Involves assessing the risk and choosing anyway. What I did at age 21 was instinctive. I saw someone in need, help and act before fear could stop me. That's not the same as knowing how to take care of yourself. It took me 3 years of confinement. A woman with my face who almost and weeks of recovery in a hospital. Understand that instinct that I had put in the water. That day, he had kept me passive too long, waiting for someone to arrive on time, waiting for circumstances to change by themselves. I would like resentment to replace action, because acting seemed impossible when I had nothing. But it had something. I always had something. I was 3 years old. Of information that no one had asked me to compile, but which he had compiled anyway. Because listening
is what you do.
When the noise of snow is too high to produce anything else. Had the ability to observe without being observed. I had the paper and the pen I was asking for at the hospital. Had Marcus, who came on his own. Because some people in the wrong circles have an intact conscience. Had at the end what he had always had. The instinct to act before fear could stop me. It only took me a while to recognize it, because this time the water was different. I stayed not because I couldn't leave, but because I chose to. Stay, that is a difference that seems small from the outside. Is the most important difference. That has existed since September. The marriage we have now is not the one Ethan took without my consent in that scene. Interrupted is one that started from scratch, without prior defining documents, with a handwritten sheet of paper and a double signature with no buried clauses. There are still difficult things, I will not deny it. People are not transformed into perfect versions of themselves because the scenario changes. Aton remains a controller on the edges. In the small gestures that have to be made up. And I point it out to you when it happens, because that's the deal now. But there is also this. A shared library. Real conversations. The possibility of leaving if I decide that I should go, and the certainty that the person who made all the decisions of this last year was me. Not the child who drowned in a lake. Not the woman locked in a residence. Which learned the difference between saving others and save herself.